at the end, that's the question.
Oh, okay, great. All right, once again, welcome to Band in Boston. Thanks for coming, Michelle.
Thank you, Jessica.
And before we get started, I did want to just recognize a few other people in the audience. We have, and a special thank you to Lou Murray and to Safe Boston for all his work. We have a couple members of the GOP State Committee here as well. Debbie Julian, Brendan O'Connell, here, Earl Shawley. All right, thank you. We have our very own ICE Field Office Director here with a couple of his colleagues, Todd Lyons. Tomorrow there's a rally to support ICE at the ICE Field Office in Burlington, Massachusetts. The address is 1000 District Avenue. I hope you all can join us. Tell your friends, tell your relatives. Please be there to show our support for the men and women of ICE who do so much to keep us safe, to enforce our laws. We appreciate you. We also have some members of one of our local grassroots activist groups, Massachusetts Coalition for Immigration Reform. Peter Skudlarek, John Thompson, Henry Barbaro, and others here. To hold our lawmakers' feet to the fire. There's a reason Massachusetts does not offer in-state tuition to illegal aliens, nor allow illegal aliens to legally obtain driver's licenses, and a few other things that some other states have adopted that have not been adopted here. And the reason is because citizens like you speak up about it and make it uncomfortable for our lawmakers to enact laws contrary to our sovereignty and to the will of voters. So thank you all for all you do.
Thank you.
Again, thanks for being here. Welcome to Band in Boston, Open Borders Inc. Michelle, it's great to see you. Michelle Malkin has been an absolutely essential fixture in the public debate over immigration for almost 20 years now. Has been reporting what's been going on. My organization gave her an award, the CATS Award for Excellence in Immigration Reporting in 2016, but she's been at it for a long time. On topics, writing about topics that nobody else wanted to write about, and to help educate the public, and examining the impact of our immigration policy on Americans, on American communities, on our labor market, on public safety, and most importantly, on our sovereignty. And now this is the latest tome from Michelle, Open Borders Inc., in a series, and I highly recommend her other books as well, Sold Out and Invasion, and a few others before it.
I call it my Star Wars trilogy of immigration.
So,
I think we're at the Empire Strikes Back right now.
it did feel that way. But it's a great read. I highly recommend it. And so what I'd like to do is just ask Michelle a few questions about some of the topics in the book, and then leave as much time as possible for you folks to ask questions as well. I go to a lot of book events, and that way I can, because I don't have time to read all the books I want to. But I like it also when people read from the books, which I would like to do a little bit as well.
Sure, yeah.
So unless you'd like to do it, but I have a few my favorite passages.
Please.
Yes. But just tell us a little bit about how you got into the immigration issue.
It's been a long journey. It's been a quarter century of being out of the closet as an advocate for strict immigration enforcement and for very vigilantly highlighting how every aspect of life in America is affected by the decisions to either enforce the laws or to neglect and abandon them. And everybody here who's followed my work, whether as a newspaper columnist in my beginning days in Los Angeles, to the Seattle Times, to my stints on Fox News and then on social media, knows my own personal history, and that of course is a big part of it. I'm not an immigrant hater, I'm not a racist, I'm not a xenophobe, and as many times as people call me and paint me as a white supremacist, I'm not just not. Yes, and for a long time, that label has really deterred and scared people from speaking up, and I feel like it's part of my mission to provide a signal. You know, we hear a lot about virtue signaling all of the time, and really that's a misnomer because that's vice signaling. And the vices that so many people signal for the approbation of both the open borders left and the right is the vice of wanting to put a shield up to tell people I'm not a racist, I'm not a hater. And I don't think we need to be defensive because in fact what motivates us is love. Love of our country, love of our family, and love of our Creator. That's what binds every single person in this room. And so from my early days in Los Angeles, I really started to see the fissures, the cracks in our unified civic culture. And LA was the canary in the coal mine. And in fact, it is the 25-year anniversary of Proposition 187. Every time that voters have had the opportunity to weigh in on the topic of immigration and sovereignty, they've always weighed in favor of unity and against division, which of course the euphemism for division among so many in the open borders incorporated infrastructure is diversity. Who could be against diversity? Well, for my family, the imperative was assimilation. It was to swear to uphold the laws and Constitution of the United States and to adopt one common tongue and one common civic culture, and to abide by the laws in this country and to understand that it was a privilege to be here and not some sense of entitlement. So that's what drove the early days of my reporting, was to talk about, for example, the impact of mass illegal immigration from the southern border on things like the school district and you know, the teachers having to deal with hundreds of different dialects in the school system, and almost a militant sense, especially among the academic elite, that there was something wrong with demanding that people assimilate into America. And that's when I became familiar with concepts like Reconquista. And that is where I tripped on the likes of the Southern Poverty Law Center, where I was first targeted in 2006 and 2007. These were the very early days, before anybody knew what deplatforming was, before the hate map was even a thing. And I was targeted early on for Fox News appearances where I would talk about this idea of Azaplan, and the idea, the declared explicit idea among left-wing academics, identity politics radicals, that the entire Southwest did not belong to the United States, and the way that this academic elite was going to take it back was by sheer demographic overwhelming. I moved from Los Angeles to Seattle and made many friends and contacts with Border Patrol and the northern border, and that certainly opened my eyes up to the dangers of the much neglected northern border, which you know, nobody talks about. But you know, when you have liberal Canadian governments that are allowing every last jihadi group to get into the country, yes, that poses a threat to us. And there was a wake-up call with the 2000, the 2000 LAX Millennium Plot, where somebody had come in from the northern border in Washington State, and it was a very vigilant customs agent that made the difference between innocent people living and dying there. Then, of course, 9/11 hit, and that's what ushered in my first book, Invasion. And there, the primary focus was on national security and public safety. And I highlighted many cases in which law enforcement officials had given their lives because of sanctuary policies that created the revolving door for so many criminal aliens. I talked about the jihadi threat, the domestic threat of many criminal alien menaces into the country, and the sort of the systematic way in which all of the law enforcement mechanisms which would have stopped, for example, the 9/11 hijackers from getting in failed us. And I wanted people to see systematically that, you know, at the time the book came out, that it was important to frame the issue as immigration as a national security, immigration as a national security matter, framed that way. And then, of course, there's the economic impact of mass, uncontrolled migration. It's not merely enough, as you hear so many sort of talking points GO people say, I'm against illegal immigration, but I'm for legal immigration. And that's sort of very elementary level. And, you know, it takes some people longer than others to come around, and it takes a lot of thought and study about the entire picture. All 9/11 hijackers came in legally. You know, many of the jihadists that have wrought bloody consequences in this country have come in through other legal means. Short-term visas, business visas, student visas, tourist visas, the diversity visa lottery. And again, it's a sense of this overwhelming of the system, sometimes deliberate and sometimes accidental, that has created not only national security problems, but economic threats to the American workforce. And so I teamed up with John Miano, who's a former computer programmer turned American lawyer, representing American workers who've been negatively affected by things like the H-1B program. Not just H-1B, but primarily. And John Miano is fighting in court, as you can document and follow on Center for Immigration Studies website, all of his, I mean, it's been an 11-year, 12-year battle now.
But a victory not too long ago.
Yes, that's right.
That tech workers affected by these visa programs actually have standing to sue in a federal case and being heard in Washington.
Okay, how Alice in Wonderland is that? That it took almost a dozen years for American workers to be recognized in court and have the ability to sue, when we've got every last legal left-wing organization in this country that's taking illegal aliens all the way up to the Supreme Court to fight for their rights to avoid deportation, get work permits.
Or people who want to apply for a visa, haven't even been approved for it, had standing to sue over the president's vetting
The travel
no,
yeah, that's right. People who aren't even here yet, yes, who have standing in American courts. It's crazy. And so then, you know, just to fast forward, the last year I've spent numerous sleepless nights and early mornings compiling Open Borders, Inc. And it is a tome. It's the longest of the books that I've written, my 7th, lucky 7 or unlucky 7, I don't know. Nearly 500 pages. Of course, a lot of this material will be familiar to those who've been in the fight a long time, but I think just sort of like the comprehensive nature of it, and as a useful, comprehensive guide, especially leading up until the 2020 elections, about who's subsidizing this massive human smuggling racket.
And this is chock full of information, not only so that people can understand more and learn more, and there are some things that, even as long as I've been at it, shocked even me, but it's also a resource for people to use when doing what you all do on a regular basis, lighting a fire under our lawmakers, talking to your neighbors, and so on. So, I mean, there are a bunch of appendices. Don't be too put off by the size of it, but it's really full of a lot of information and very well documented. And